Recap. Monster Hunter Rise is fire. I did a review on it. You can check it out if you want. There are 14 different weapons and one gets pooped on more than others. Let's start the video. Gunlance is one of the best weapons in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Yeah, I said it. While it might still get outmatched in terms of raw damage from something like light bowgun, just judging a weapon based on its base DPS is like judging a cake on its icing. Yeah, icing is delicious, and it's what a lot of people will focus on, but if you just eat the icing without eating any of the cake and judge the overall cake on the icing, you're not a food critic, you're just weird. Or you just really like icing. But anyway, that's enough dilly-dallying, so let's start talking about the Gunlance. And if you have any critiques or defenses you want to say about the Gunlance, be sure to leave them in the comments down below, and I'll try to reply. But let's start talking about the most critiqued part of the Gunlance, its damage. The biggest complaint I hear about the Gunlance is that you can't do enough damage with it. And while I find that hard to believe due to the fact that you can hit consistent high 90s to low 100s per shelling with the weakest shelling types,
that's a lot of damage!
Let's still acknowledge what they have to say. A lot of them state that even though the damage of something like a full burst combo is good, you don't have enough time to use it, and are often forced to use weaker attacks to prevent yourself from getting stuck in animation commitment, and getting hit. First off, I find that I can get off more than enough full burst combos in a match, so if you're constantly unable to use your higher damaging combos, that might not be the weapon's fault. And two, that's kind of basic game design. If you do a move like Bullet Barrage that does like 2000 damage, of course it's gonna take a long time to recover. That's called risk and reward, or literally game essence. But even though the Gunlance's damage nowadays is actually quite high, it used to suck, right?
No.
Part 2, weapons having multiple purposes. While yes, in base Rise, if you looked at the base DPS on monsters, it wasn't great. It was actually at the bottom of the speedrunning leaderboard, which I'll get to in a bit. But if every weapon's only purpose was just to do DPS, you wouldn't need 14 different weapons. And the Gunlance's main purpose was being a beast in multiplayer. Chaos Slayer, one of the main Gunlancers here on YouTube, made a video titled Data Shows that Gunlance is doing great in Monster Hunter Rise multiplayer. That showed the Gunlance's DPS in multiplayer was on the same level as the Longsword. This is something I noticed too, even back in base Rise. I found that the Gunlance absolutely destroyed in multiplayer for multiple reasons, including great defense, mobility, shelling damage, and warp mistake dealing damage even when the monster is far away from you. So while the Gunlance damage may leave something desired back in base Rise for solo hunts, it excelled at its true purpose. Multiplayer, allowing you to effortlessly blow apart monsters with your friends, just as the Founding Fathers intended. And like I said, this was back in base Rise, when Shellings were lucky to get up to 40 damage per hit. Just think of how more broken Gunlance is nowadays, with normal type Shellings being able to hit consistent high 90s. Speaking of Shellings, Part 3, the nature of Shellings. Earlier I stated that Gunlance placed lowest on the speedrunning leaderboard, and all I have to say about that is, yeah, no shit! Of course Gunlance doesn't do good in speedrunning. Most of its damage comes from Shellings. If you don't know, Shellings are the explosions that the Gunlance shoots. And their unique property is that they do the same amount of damage, no matter where you hit. So if you're a speedrunner who plays the game by restarting the same quest 100 times until the monster does exactly what you want it to do, yeah, Shellings aren't going to be that great for damage because you're only hitting the most damaging weak spots. But for the 99% of players who aren't speedrunners, you're not going to be hitting their tiny little head most of the time because either someone else drew aggro, the monster flinched and it got knocked out of the way, or the monster's just doing anything making it harder for you to hit the head. Because of this, there is not a single monster that Gunlance is weak against. It's good against every monster, and is probably the most consistent weapon in the entire game. And well, yeah, sneak attack does make it so you have to be behind the monster to do the maximum damage. That's still half of the monster you can hit for full damage, and the damage loss of not hitting the back of a monster is nowhere near as bad as not hitting the weak spot for most other weapons. Part 4. Builds. Whenever I hear someone complaining about the struggles of making a Gunlance build, I'm always just thinking, what? Like, are you sure you just didn't get confused and are trying to make a build for regular Lance? Because the skills you need to make a Gunlance build are artillery, load shells, sneak attack, protective polish, and congratulations! You just made a Gunlance build that achieved 90% of its maximum damage. Pretty much everything after that is just for comfort. A Fate Extender, guard skills, and maybe some attack and crit boost as an extra bonus, then fill in the one slots with things like flinch free and speed sharpening and you're done! Gunlance is by far the easiest weapon to make a build for, because most of your damage comes from specific skills like artillery, and for those of you saying that Gunlance would be better if Shellings also scaled with attack skills, do you wanna trivialize every other weapon in the game? Because that's how you trivialize every other weapon in the game. Part 5. It's just worse Lance. Yeah, fine. If you're playing wide Gunlance, you're basically just playing worse Lance, because they play on the same way, except wait a minute! Lance no longer plays by poking! That's right, they dramatically changed the way that the weapon works, so now all of your lance damage comes from weirdly positioned slaps that do less overall damage than Gunlance, unless you consistently time your 4-frame counter, and if you can consistently pull off insta-block, congratulations, you don't have a life. I mean, I don't either, but that's besides the point. But in reality, Gunlance and Lance are very different weapons, and just calling one a worse version of the other kind of undermines their unique attributes. Part 6. The conclusion. The Gunlance is an amazing weapon. It has pretty decent damage, greatly excels in multiplayer, has easy to make builds, and is the most consistent weapon in the game. Everything I didn't mention about the Gunlance in this video is also great too. Its mobility, complexity, defense, switch skills, all of them are great. And I'm not saying the Gunlance is a perfect weapon. I'm simply saying that it's a flawless weapon. There's a difference. But I do actually think that the Gunlance is probably the most underrated weapon in the game. Though there is one thing about the weapon that is universally loved, and has been in the game since Base Rise. And for me, it automatically makes it the best weapon in the game. And I, of course, am talking about Valstrax. End the video!